Welcome to another edition of Toyo's Talk, where I bring interesting people I've met in my life to talk about a subject. Today, we're going to talk about practice growth with the scaling guru, Rod Solar. Recently met Rod when we were in a panel together in London. Um, Rod's been all over the world lecturing. He's actually lecturing today at another conference, and I'm glad that he blocked out some time for us. He talks to doctors about growing and scaling their business. He has 20 years of experience doing that. He's worked with over 100 ophthalmologists in 39 countries, helping them double their revenue. And he's a featured article writer for The Ophthalmologist and CRST. Rod, thanks for taking some time and coming on to Toyo's Talks.
A real pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So you actually, I know you ask these questions to doctors all the time, but I'm going to ask this question to you. Can you give me a brief history of how you got into ophthalmology and arrived here as a scalable advisor?
Yeah, I mean, quite by accident, to be honest with you. It was over 20 years ago now, where my wife and I, Laura Lucy, who's I still run the business with today, we were just cold calling for our business, which was a marketing agency. And we were really fresh, really new. And we ended up cold calling a laser refractive surgeon. And he had just repurchased his practice from a company called LASIK Vision that had gone bankrupt because it was the first discount laser eye surgery chain in North America. And they were selling procedures for less money than it was costing to deliver. So not a great business model. And he got out of that and restarted his own practice and needed help. And so he asked us to come in to have a conversation. And that was the first day I ever saw a LASIK procedure. And I was completely blown away by the incredible value that could be created in such little time with such little effort on behalf of the patient. And at the time, even then, comparably low risk. Yeah, I was hooked. I was thinking, man, this is incredible, and I need to be involved. So Hugo Sutton, that was the name of the surgeon, ended up referring me to another surgeon, fellow of his, Dan Reinstein, who ended up inviting me to come to England and set up his practice. And so I got real deep. And if your listeners know who Dan Reinstein is, he is an absolute legend in the area of refractive surgery. Everyone who's a refractive surgeon knows who he is. And I was very, very fortunate to be attached with him as a lighthouse, leading the way, really making me an evangelist convert to the field, and also letting me try everything I knew at the time to grow his practice. And over time, yeah.
What's interesting is how many practices started from these discount centers that went bust. I actually bought one of those myself, and I could never understand how could they buy watermelons for $2 and sell them for $1. I mean, it was just amazing. It just tells you how businesses need to kind of look at the numbers to figure out. And they always they always would point to numbers. Oh, we're getting so many patients. And I think doctors were always scratching their heads on how are they making this work?
Yeah. You know, what's interesting too is that like the quality of the surgery, even then, I mean, you're going 20 years back in the early days, was still very good. Even at those high volumes, the problem was entirely in the business model. And I think that this is something that has been pretty much true to form in refractive surgery since those days, and even continues to today, is that while the surgery is great, while the outcomes are superb and only getting better all the time, it's the business models that are dragging it really down. And even to this day, people are still underpricing eye surgery. And it's one of the big bugbears I have, and it's one of the big, lightning rods for me, is the whole idea of how most surgeons out there are mispriced or underpriced. And I believe it is one of the defining factors behind why the industry is lagging in adoption. Because if people see the thing as a discount thing, then they don't believe it's real. They don't believe it works. All those negative associations with low price things. Or they're waiting for other people to offer sales that'll never come. So this is a huge problem in the industry. And one of my aims is to transform that, to encourage and embolden surgeons to charge the absolute most they can, uh, so that they can flush those profits back into the practice, making it a better practice, and hire the best people and have the best kit, and really just increase the standard for all of surgery that's delivered everywhere. And really to face reality that it is now a consumer retail procedure that needs to be treated as such, and not necessarily something that is done the way, for example, that state medicine is provided, or at a discount. So anyway, that's the big thing for me, is really helping practices that I advise become price confident.
Yeah. And the interesting thing that you said there is that's what most private practices do, is when they generate revenue, they put it back into the practice. So I know very few doctors who own their own practice that aren't constantly updating technology and taking profits and actually putting it back into the practice to make the practice better and keep their employees. I think one thing looking at on the other side is there's still those discount models out there. You still hear them on the radio. They're doing it a little bit better than those groups that went bankrupt. I think there's only one major one. They bought up everybody in the area here in the United States, but they get on the radio and they do this bait and switch model where they go, "Hey, come in for LASIK for $900." And no patient gets it for $900. They come into the office, then they say, "Oh, well, you have a correction over minus a half," which is, everybody that comes into the office has
Pretty
minus.
much.
"Oh, you have a little astigmatism, that'll cost this." "Oh, you actually want a surgeon to do your surgery? Well, it's going to cost this." So they just keep adding more and more layers to it. So how do you, what's your advice to combat that type of publicity and
Well,
advertising?
that's a super good question. Look, I think there, in any offering, you can make money on both edges. So you can make money at the budget side, because on the volume you can make a lot of money. But however, if you're going to do that, then your entire operation needs to be built from ground up to be a scaled budget operation, right? So for example, a very, very useful way of looking at the vision correction space is to look at airlines. And there are budget airlines that make lots and lots of money, and they do it very, very well because there are no frills and the customer gets exactly what they expect. Point A to point B, nothing more. Everything else you pay for, right? And that's all understandable. It's all very much an upsell game there. And a lot of money is able to be made there. But the other side of the equation is that you can also really only operate as an independent small business owner, doctor-led practice business on the higher end of the equation, selling at premium. There's no middle ground, right? And so one of the biggest problems or one of the biggest mistakes that practice owners and doctorpreneurs make is they look at everybody in their market and they say, okay, well, there's a guy over there that's kind of high price. There's a discounter over here that's low price. I'm just going to go smack in the middle because that seems fair. And I'm naturally, because I'm in the middle, everybody chooses the middle option. Therefore, they're going to choose me. It's not how it works, right? It's not how it works, because there's always going to be a market for people who want the cheapest of the cheap, and they will go in that direction. And I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to be like, hey, if budget is your number one concern, if price is the most important thing to you, then go in that direction. All good. But if you want to treat your eyes like the only two possessions you have that can actually see out of your head, then come to me, because I'm going to be the premium level. So if you only want to do this once and do it right the first time, then come to me. But I'm going to charge you for it. And I'm going to also provide you the experience that envelops that service. So one way to avoid getting sucked in to uh, playing somebody else's game is to lower your prices and try to play around the discounts or around the middle. Instead, just go the other direction
Yeah.
and really serve all those folks who are more than happy to pay for a premium experience. In every single market, there's going to be 20% of the people who are happy to pay 80% more than everybody else. It's just always the way it is. Just look at an airplane, right? Again, back to the aviation analogy. There's
Yeah.
always going to be people who want to go into business and want to fill first. And then there's also going to be a whole bunch of people who also want to go into the economy, and that's okay, right? Everybody gets there safely. Everybody gets there at the same time. The experience is what's different. And I think the key thing there is just to know what game you're playing. Are you business class or are you economy? And know that the economy doesn't really make a lot of money unless you're selling to millions, right? That's when the economy works.
Yeah.
On premium, in terms of the supply that you're able to provide, and it doesn't even have to be that much. It has to be at the premium end. It has to be at the high ticket.
Yeah. No, it's amazing how many people, you're right. You're never going to get those low uh priced and compete with those low priced people because
Yeah,
I I've always tell this story and I was always amazed by it is that we had back in the day a van that for, would come in and do LASIK. So they would advertise on the radio, really low
yeah,
prices, and then they would give an address, which was a parking lot mall, and they'd have this kind of van
amazing.
or whatever you
Yeah,
want to call it, a truck, a semi,
yeah,
whatever. And that was their clinic and that was their LASIK. And they would, do LASIK for 2 weeks and, go on to the next city. And then practices like mine were left with the aftercare,
the cleanup.
all the problems and all the stuff that was set up with that. But I would always ask these patients, why'd you go to a van to have your eye surgery? And they just, they would just say, well, they advertised this price and it just seemed so much cheaper. And it's like,
Yeah, yeah,
so you're never going to get, if you try to compete with the van, you're never going to compete with the van. That's
yeah.
not, you, if you have your own practice and you have pride and whatever, because these people never even knew who the surgeon was, and they couldn't pick him out of a lineup. They saw him for that brief couple minutes, and then he was gone. He wasn't in that town ever again. He didn't care. Whereas the doctor that's providing premium, that's the same doctor that you're going to see in the supermarket, you're going to see in your neighborhood. You
Hmm.
can always
Hmm.
get to them. You could always
Yeah,
say, hey, I'm here. I was your patient.
yeah.
Um, and so it's amazing.
There's no advantage being the second most expensive option in town. There really isn't,
Yeah.
right? So either choose the most or choose the least. And the no man's land in the middle, they call it no man's land for a reason, right?
Yeah.
It's where businesses go to die. So, stay away from the no man's land, stay away from the middle. Nobody knows what you stand for. You can't do either of the two things right.
Yeah.
So just if you're going to be small, which most businesses are, then just go to the top
Yeah.
and do the thing right. Because yeah, again, I mean, you're only going to do this once for most patients, hopefully.
Yeah.
So, I always give you an analogy. Like, it's like, imagine you're in an airplane and you had to jump out of the airplane because the airplane's going down. You got two parachutes on the wall. You can choose one. One of them's going to be $300 and the other one's $50. Which one do you choose?
Yeah.
Right? This is not the time for discounts, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, just grab the $300 parachute, jump out, and open your eyes and be happy with it, because this is the one that's going to pay off in the end.
Smart analogies. Because, we recently on LinkedIn, there was somebody from Entrepreneurs kind of comparing surgery to and surgeons to pilots. So these are all, I don't know where we got into the airline thing, but those are perfect. So I'm going to use all of those when that comes up again.
Oh,
On
that's great.
In working with ophthalmology practices throughout the world, what are the common mistakes that you see in all of them? Like Australia and England and US, what are common mistakes that we all make?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a super good question. Well, one of them is the one we just talked about, which is underpricing, or pricing um, to try to attract more people instead of pricing for value. So that's one key error, and we've talked a little bit about that already. I think another one is absolutely doing too many things all at once instead of focusing and doubling down on the thing that you can do best. So and this is the challenge with seeing yourself as, say, for example, an ophthalmologist, somebody who can do lots of different things. And so, you can do cataracts on one day, you can do dry eye on the next day, you can do LASIK on the Wednesday, you can do maybe a little bit of retina work, you can do a little bit of glaucoma, and you kind of mix it all up. And it sounds great because you think, well, I've got all these like bows in my quiver. Why not shoot them all? But when you're shooting at all these different targets, you never really get super, super good at one. And it's the height of pride and arrogance to imagine that you can do something one day a week when somebody else is doing it 5 days a week, full time from beginning to end. You're not going to be as good, right? That's not how experts are made, right? Unless you're like looking at heptathlon athletes or, I mean, okay, theirs might be an exception, but the vast majority, if you look at yourself like a pro athlete, for example, right? You're unlikely going to be doing lots of different sports. You're going to be doing one sport. And in that sport, you're probably going to be playing one position, right? So it makes sense that an expert is somebody who does the same thing repeatedly again and again and again and doesn't spread themselves so thin that they end up doing all of these things half-ass, right? That's not what an expert makes. And so if you want to be an expert, in other words, if you want to charge at that premium level because you are an expert, then it only follows that you're really good at that one thing. So that's a huge problem that a lot of practices make. Another one, honestly, is just not getting the word out. Like so many people imagine. I was having a conversation with a surgeon the other day about this whole phrase from Field of Dreams, right? If you build it, they will come. And the reality is that that's a myth that operates inside the movies, but does not really occur in real life. At least it doesn't anymore. I mean, maybe back in the day. I mean, I think the other thing too, a lot of mentors in ophthalmology learned their craft at a time when there was much less consumer ophthalmology available. They were like the only guy in town. So basically they just had to open up a shingle, say, I'm here once, and then they'd be flooded with patients. Those days are over. And unfortunately, a lot of people are learning that that's the way that it was done because it was done 20 years ago, but it doesn't work anymore today. And most ophthalmologists, in my experience, who are in private practice are absolutely not letting enough people know that they exist.
Mhm.
And if more people knew that they existed, they would get more business and their business would be better because they would have more patients. And because they have more patients, they would have more profits. And if they had more profits, they could make their business better. So, in my view, if you have something good, like really good to share with the world, it's your moral obligation to tell people about it.
Mhm.
Yet, so many people, especially academics, doctors, experts, fear this idea that if I tell people about what I do, then it looks like I'm begging or I'm groveling or I'm trying to persuade or unduly convince people to I got my begging bowl out hoping somebody will pay me. No, I mean, it couldn't be further from the truth. These patients out there who want what you offer are dying for options like you.
Yeah.
So do them a favor and let them know you exist. Right. And unfortunately, the only way you have to do that or can do that is through advertising. Now, I define advertising a slightly different way than most people do, which is basically just telling people that you exist, telling people about your stuff. And if you follow that approach, then you cannot help but generate leads. You cannot help but generate patients. You cannot help but build a good practice if you let enough people know that you exist.
Yeah, I was one of the people I'm going to have on is a founder of a huge corporation. I won't give it away, but early on when he was a patient of mine, I would just kind of ask him business advice, and I just said, can you give me some keys to business? It's very easy. He said, innovate, advertise, repeat. He said, just remember those three words, and you're going to do really well. And it just blew me away because, it wasn't any, it's very simple, but we kind of complicate it. But
Oh, that's another thing that I really like to do as much as possible, because I kind of overcomplicated things for so long, like that my thinking wasn't sufficiently clear. And like there's this thing called the Fenneman test, that if you can't explain something to say like an 8-year-old and have them understand it, then you truly do not understand or comprehend the subject itself, and you're
yeah,
just kind of making it up, right? And um, I have strived to make what I say as simple as possible over the years. And now I am, for example, I am using things like, yeah, advertising is letting people know about your stuff. Like that's the simplest way that it can be put. Or, hey, just do more, do better, do new, right? Like the simplest way that it can be put. As you said, innovate, then what was that? Innovate, then
Innovate, advertise, and repeat. It was like,
that's so simple, right? Yeah. I mean, basically that's what it all boils down to. In business, you make stuff, you tell people about the stuff, you sell the stuff, and then you make more stuff. Right?
you,
Like, I mean, that's
the
it.
fourth one he said, which you really don't even have to add, but he said always continue to innovate. Once you
Hmm.
stop innovating, then you have nothing to talk about except the same thing over and over again. So always kind of look to innovate and make that part of your just normal culture in your
Hmm.
business, which is important as well.
Well,
You,
I think one thing we can be sure of is that whatever worked like last year, like it may or may not work today. So yeah, we always have to be open to the fact that the stuff that we're doing isn't working anymore. Because if there's one rule about all the things that we're doing, is that one day they won't work. And so we need to identify and consciously be on the lookout and not buy into our own BS that the way we did it before is the only and best way. We
yeah.
absolutely have to be open to the view of doing new things. With that said, though, only after we've done all the things that we are currently doing more and better, and then
Yeah.
eventually we can get to new. But yeah, do new with deliberation, do new
Yeah,
insightfully, do
yeah.
new
I think he was
seriously.
just saying, always look, always keep looking. And he made some,
Yeah,
he would tell me about some of the things that didn't work, but he said just don't be afraid, don't be fearful,
yeah,
just keep doing it. But it brings up the point, one of the lectures that I saw that you gave at Optopreneurs, which inspired me, is you gave a lecture on more, is basically what I got out of it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
uh,
That's the first step.
and that kind of inspired me to get off my butt and get this podcast going, because I said for like the last 3 years, I'm going to get this going, I'm going to get this going. Uh, so tell us some of the points about that lecture. I'm simplifying it into more, one word, but tell us a little bit about that lecture, which I thought was great.
Yeah. So I mean, the it all stems from this. How do you prioritize what to do? And essentially, uh, like all life, all business is about prioritization. It's about what do you do first, and then what do you do second, and what do you do third. And those priorities may shift over time, but those among us who make things happen in life are able to prioritize better than those who prioritize the wrong things, essentially. So it follows then the question naturally that arises is what do you prioritize, right? And so it in my view, there's in if you're in a business, the only things you can prioritize is you have to either get more customers, make them worth more, or reduce the risk of those two things continuing to happen. Those are the priorities, like one of those three. So then you have to choose one of those things that you're going to do, and it depends on where your bottleneck is. Like if you need more customers, that's the one you have to focus on. If you're in a business that retains customer, like the dry eye business, right? Like you've got to retain people, like because you can't solve their problem in one step. You have to continuously aid them over time, and you have to make them feel like it's worth returning because it's in their best interest. Or you reduce the risk of those two things happening, right? Through protocols, through processes, through hiring the right team, through having a good growth engine. But once you've chosen your strategic priority, what's important to you as a business owner, then you just have to do more as the first step of what's already working. Because too many times people just get so enamored and intoxicated with the latest trend, the latest thing, the latest social media platform, the latest idea, that they hop off the thing that was already working. Either they just stop doing it because they get bored of it, or they just don't give it enough time for the returns to mature and return to them for all the work that they put in. And so I hate to see this, because I see this all the time. It's this kind of hopping around from priority to priority to priority to priority, and never really sticking with anything long enough for it to work. And you and I both know that the only things that really work are the things that you put a lot of time and energy into, right? Like, I mean, yeah, sure, you can get lucky, but if you want to negate luck, if you want to not be subject to luck, then you have to do things for an extraordinary period of time. And really, the benefits don't accrue until after most of the pain has been already exercised, right? So the whole idea behind more before doing other things is just figure out what's working now and just do more of it. And I think, like, for example, if you're like, let's say, for example, your strategic priority is, I want to get more customers. You got to think, okay, well, what's working to get more customers now, right? So am I doing free content? Is that working? Am I doing paid traffic? Is that working? Am I doing warm reach outs? Am I doing cold outreach? Which of those things is working best for me? Though, so instead of just saying, well, instead of like hopping over the new thing that I don't know how to do yet, how about I just do more of the thing that I'm already doing that's already working, so that with the repetitions and the iterations, which is called learning, I get better, right? So if you are trying to advertise, for example, for your service, then chances are, if you haven't done advertising for a very long time, you're probably not going to be very good at it. And that makes sense, because like in all walks of life, whenever we try a new skill, we're not good at it, right? So why would we be surprised? So if you just do more of it, guess what will happen? You will become better, right? And if you just, but most of the time you don't get to give yourself the opportunity. You rob yourself of becoming better because you didn't do more of it,
Yeah.
right? You play sports, surely, right? Like you train, you know that the only way to get better at something typically is, number one, copy an expert. Number two, do it lots and lots of times, right? I mean, surgery works this way,
Yeah.
right? Like the more volume you do, the better you get, right? Why? Because you see more patterns, you see more, you also are able to see what to do when things go off plan, so that you can handle it, because that's what really makes the difference between an expert and just somebody who does a lot of stuff. So the only way to develop that learning and that expertise in anything is to do more of it. And so that's the message of more, is just do more. And even though it's boring, and even though it's tedious, and sometimes you go, well, can't we just do something different because this thing's working too well?
Yeah.
Don't do that. Just keep going until you maxed it out. And what naturally occurs as a result of that is that you then become better at the thing. And once you've mastered it, then you can move on to the next thing. So let's say you master paid ads, then you can move on to free content, for example. Now, that's not necessarily the order that I'd go in, but it all depends on what you have more of, right? Like, do you have more time or do you have money, right? Because and what do you value more? So if you value your time more than your money, then you probably want to use paid ads to try to get more people to know about your stuff. But if you value your money more than your time, then you probably want to do free content, because free content takes time, right? And if you don't have money, then you can't do ads, right? So you just have, first rule of entrepreneurship is using what you have and then doing more of it.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's interesting because you mentioned the word, and I think that's probably the thing for clinics and surgeons, and they get a little bored. Maybe they get bored
Yeah.
with, we've been doing this thing. Let's do something different, and then they kind of
Yeah.
change direction. And but
Yeah.
boredom, maybe that might be the number one reason why people aren't doing the thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that now there's probably like a personality trait. It might not be entirely learned. Maybe some of us have the predilection to do things repeatedly, and while others really don't like repetition, I'm one of those people, very fortunately, that really enjoys repetition.
Mm.
Like, I am And maybe I have that sort of overlap with surgeons too, and why we sometimes understand each other is that I am very much able to do the same thing again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
What bores me is doing the same thing again and again and again and not getting better at it.
Yeah.
Okay. Because if I'm getting better at the thing, then I'm enjoying that process, because there's nothing you like to do more in the world than the things you're good at.
Yeah.
So if I progressively feel like I am making little notch steps towards perfection, despite the fact that I know I will never get to perfection, and that's okay. But as long as I'm directionally accurate towards that state of nirvana we call perfection, then I feel good about that. And that's how I translate the work. I go, the work is working on me to make me better. And that's how I don't get bored.
Yeah.
Because every single, like, for example, when we go to the gym, right? When you do that, like that deadlift or that squat for the thousandth time, right? It might be boring, but I'm not bored, because every single time I do it, I think I'm adding more weight. I'm improving my form. I'm improving my breathing. I'm improving my foot position. I'm improving where my hands are. I'm improving my grip. All of these little things are getting better. And so I guess I just reframed work that's repetitive into work that makes me better.
Yeah.
So how could I possibly not like that?
Well, I think what happens too is when you do put in all those hours, things get simpler for you. They don't get, you start finding nuances in just the little things and to make it better. And I always tell people, I saw Michael Jordan play when he was young,
Yeah.
and I also
Yeah.
saw him play his last 2 years when he was with the Washington Wizards. And was very interesting to me when he was younger, he was all over the place. I mean, you could see him all over.
Mm.
He was like working so hard to score
Yes.
20 points. And he was just like, oh, and I was
Mhm.
like, it was so frenetic. And then I saw him in his last 2 years, and he put up 20 points and he didn't even break a sweat. He'd simplified all of that running around, all that stuff into
Yes.
finding a spot, getting the ball, and making a basket, and it looks so effortless. And
Yes.
you go away going, why doesn't everybody do that? And I'm like, well, he has all this experience and he's broken everything
Yes.
down into like the simplest thing, and he's cut out all the waste. So yeah, I think
Yes.
that's the thing. People like to do that, like you said, they like to figure that out, or people quit too early before they figure that out. Before they figure out
Yeah.
that the more you do something, the all of a sudden more doors open and you start seeing things in a different way. And
Yeah.
that's the modeling thing. When people come and see something, like we have doctors that come and watch our dry eye clinic, and then they see how we've over the years we've broken everything down, so now it's simpler. They go, oh wow.
Yes.
And you just realize that that's what you get out of those 10,000 hours, as Gladwell said, of becoming an expert, is that you start finding those little things that make it just better and simpler. uh
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
a couple more questions before we get out of here.
Sure.
This is my personal question. In
Okay.
eye care, we get people who know nothing about eye care. So what we do is we bring them in and we train them, and we
Mm.
invest all these hours and money, and we get them like fully trained. But now they're this valuable, we've taken them and we've made this really valuable thing where you have a
Yeah.
completely trained, and then the vultures come, they circle around, and whether it's industry or others, they take now this well-trained person and they offer them all sorts of things to kind of take them away. I mean, recently, uh, so we had employee and trained them in research. They had no experience whatsoever. And then out of the blue, they were scooped up by another group, and with money, with a lot of money to do that. So how do we change that so that we can retain these employees that we've made very valuable.
Yeah, it's a huge issue, because a lot of people worry about that. And one of the most common refrains is, hey, you might worry about training your employees really, really well. And what happens if they leave? Yeah, but if you don't, like, what happens when you don't train your employees really
Oh,
well,
yeah.
really well? And what happens if they stay, right? So I think honestly, the answer lies in turning mercenaries into missionaries. So
Mm,
what do I mean by that? Well, look, when somebody joins your outfit, they're exchanging money for time. Let's be real. That's what they're doing. And they might have a little hope involved in that, in, aiming to become a better person as a result. But that's minor. I believe that what the smart employer does is they turn that mercenary who will happily trade their time for someone else's money, your competitor, into a missionary who believes in what you believe. So how do we make that happen? Well, it doesn't happen just by time, right? Time isn't going to do it. What's going to do it is, number one, telling them what you believe and inviting them to see their own future carved out inside yours. Yeah. So you got to make your vision sufficiently large for them to see their spot in it.
mhm.
And so number one, you got to be super clear about where you want to go. And because that inspires people and people want to go places, right? They don't want to stay stuck, right? We all feel like, hey, I'd love to be in that spot. I'd love to be where you are. I'd love to be doing these wonderful things and have this purpose. But then you also want to show them how you expect them to behave. And you do that through values. And one of the things we do, for example, is we work really, really hard on establishing the values about how we behave. And when we reward those values and we disincentivize not honoring those values through behavior. And that's what creates culture. I mean, if
Mm,
you think about the American culture or the European culture or the Spanish culture or whatever, it's just a set of values. And the set of values are basically what you reward and what you disincentivize. So as long as you tell people, here's where we want to go and here's how you behave in order to get for us to all get there together, not in just terms of loving the destination, but also the journey, then I want you to invite you down this process. So one of the tricks that we've kind of come across is it's the same thing we do for businesses. For businesses that we initially like start working with, we always set up 3-year plans. The reason we do that, by the way, is because we want to frame the relationship as a 3-year relationship from the get-go, right? Not as a transitory thing. I want to do the same thing with employees. So you bring an employee in and you say, okay, good. So you pass your 90-day probation. Awesome. Let's lay out our 3-year plan together for where we're going to go together. So where are you now, right? In terms of your salary, in terms of what you bring to the table, in terms of your skills, in terms of your knowledge, in terms of your experiences, credentials, and all that. And where do you want to be in 3 years?
mm,
And let's figure out what that looks like every single quarter along those 3 years. And now that we've got this plan, let's work the plan. Let's meet on a regular basis, 1-to-1, and let's also check in every 90 days and aim to make the steps towards achieving the outcomes that we've both set together. That's essentially a shared vision
mhm.
with shared values and a shared path.
Yeah,
So what you're doing there is you're turning your mercenary into a missionary because now they're on a mission with you.
yeah,
And the likelihood of them leaving you for just a little bit more money in a scenario that will not provide them with that same trajectory and that same destination is hugely unlikely,
yeah,
or at least a little less likely,
yeah. No, I
which is
mean,
all you really can do.
yeah, no, that's great. Great advice. So what will be, we're going to leave with this. What will be the biggest change coming in the future that clinics need to prepare for?
So are we talking about self-pay clinics, like clinics that are offering their
Yeah,
services
like
to people who are
let's
buying them?
actually let's hone it down even and better. So you've got private equity that's buying up a bunch of clinics. Right
Yeah.
now, in the United States, only 25% of clinics are private,
Mhm.
which is down from over 50% were private even just a decade ago.
Mhm.
So what should we be looking for if we're a private clinic? Uh, what should we
Yeah,
be?
I can tell you.
Okay.
You got to master the value equation. You got to master the value equation. So the value equation is this. It's be super, super clear on helping your customers identify their outcome that they're looking to achieve. What's their dream? Be super clear about articulating it better than they can. Make it feel less risky than it otherwise would feel going to with the competitors. Make it feel faster and make it feel easier. And if you can do those four things, you can compete and outcompete pretty much anybody. Doesn't matter whether they're PE backed, bigger than you, bigger budgets, doesn't matter. Because people will always go for those value vectors, right? What's my dream outcome? What's less risk perception? What's faster and what's easier? That's what they'll go for. And if you can master that, you really, really are future-proofing any business, any practice moving forward. If they focus on those value vectors, because it's those who provide the most value are those who are going to win.
Awesome. Well, I'm not going to call you a guru anymore. I'm going to call you the Michael Jordan of practice growing and scaling. You're the Michael
Nice.
Jordan of doing that. So when I call you MJ the next time I see you, you know what I'm referring to. Rod, thanks for the time. I mean, I write notes when I talk to my people. My paper is full. I've got 1,000 things. This is why I created the podcast, because I meet people who have put in 10,000 hours in something, and they just have these pearls of wisdom because they've done it. And I talk to them and go, man, you know, everybody should have this. So I think you could use a lot of the stuff that you talked about today in whatever you're doing, whether you're doing a clinic or any small business or just in personal, do things that make you better and do more of them. You know,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
yeah,
we'll see each other soon, I'm sure, at one of the meetings. And thanks for taking out the time and coming on Toyo's Talks.
thanks so much for inviting me. Really, real pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
Mhm.